I think one of the really tricky things about the field that's called applied theatre is that it's so varied. There are tiny projects which are never seen by the public. There are very big public projects that tour and get seen by many people. There are initiatives that never work towards performance because they're about the development in the room. There are films. It's just such a varied project. So I think I just want to say that that's what makes it exciting. But of course, it means you can't sum up planning or evaluation easily. Not in a day, not in a month, not in a year, because what you're looking for is an approach to things, a way of looking at things, a set of questions rather than any answers. So personally, I don't really trust a book which tells you how to plan or a book which tells you how to evaluate, because you're the one thing that perhaps is true in all applied theatre is that you're always in dialogue with the participants, in dialogue with the partners, in dialogue with the context, what's going on in the world. So you need to have some core values and important questions, but not necessarily a rigid framework. So these are some of the things we're going to try to do today. To think about what is needed to build the structures that will help our project thrive. So I discovered this sentence. I've stolen it actually from somebody else, from a report, because an organisation wrote about their work and they said that their job as project planners was to build the structures to help the artist's ideas thrive. And I thought it was a really beautiful way of putting it. So all projects need some kind of structure. It may be a flexible structure. It may have to be quite fixed depending on where you're working. But the point of the structure is not the structure itself. The structure is there to try to enable the project to thrive. We're also going to think today a little bit about our own planning style and how to work with others who work differently. And I think this is a really good thread to think about through the whole day. Rather than thinking there is a right way to do this, think a little bit about what you like yourself. How do you work well? And how can you become more aware of that so that when you work with other people who work differently, you're able to have a dialogue to help you understand each other's ways of working. We're going to think about partnerships. Lots and lots of applied theatre work is done in partnership with organisations, different artists working together, with other sectors. So we might be working with education, with health, with social change, with therapeutic services. We're often working in partnership, and that affects the planning. Thinking about structure and flexibility. So what is definitely going to be fixed and what will always be something that can shift and change. And building flexibility into a project is a really important factor, making sure that there is space to make changes, as well as having the fixed points which you really need. Planning is often affected by the values of the work that we do. What are our values? What's important to us? If one of your values is that you want to amplify the voices of people who don't often get heard, how can you make that be alive in the structures that you create as well? When you're doing the planning, if you plan an entire project, for example, with no input from the people you're going to be working with, but the value of your work is to amplify their voices, then you already have a contradiction between the structure and the values. So thinking about how the values influence the planning. Context. What factors might affect our project? So in the world of your project, what else is going on? What else might affect the project? Might it be what else goes on in the venue that you're using? what else is going on in the cultural or religious life of your participants that might affect your project? What's going on in the wider world? What's going on politically that might affect your project? Context is very important. And then the final point here is, where are we starting from? Are you starting with 2 friends and you know you want to work with them? So you go and have a chat for a weekend and say, well, we want to work together. What would we like to work on? Or are you working from a group who have said, we'd love to have somebody come and work with us because we think we have great stories, but we don't know how to perform them? Or are you working because a funder has said, we've got money if somebody's willing to do some work on sexual health with young people? So the place that you start from is going to affect the planning. So applied theatre is sometimes known as a field where the process is more important than the product. And in fact, when I've tried to explain my work to people, some people have actually said to me, oh, I know, that's the work where you don't really care about the product. You care more about the way that you work. And I find this very interesting. I find it a bit annoying because I don't believe it. But I think it is true to say that in applied theatre, there is a very strong interest in the process. So how you work should be reflecting the values that you have. How you work should be a way which helps you work in dialogue with participants, in partnership with them. So a couple of things to think about in terms of this question. What is already in the mix? Do you know if you're going to be working towards an outcome, to a show or an exhibition? Are you committed to these? Are they fixed? Or could you halfway through say, well, we said we were going to do a poetry project, but actually the group of participants would much rather make a podcast. Can you do that? Can you do that? And then thinking about what is the process that you need to get to the end product with the participants. So if you know that you are working towards a product, what is going to be a good process to get to the product? It may not be the same process as you might use if you're working with a group of professional actors and theatre makers. There will be other things that you need to think about. And a visual artist who works a lot with community groups said to me that you need to pay attention to the fact that there is the life of the art, and the art process has a particular journey, but there's also the life of the group. And sometimes the life of the group is demanding something slightly different to the art process. So in order to achieve the product, you may really, really need to rehearse. For the health of the group, you may really, really need to sit down and talk. And you need to navigate the tension between these needs when you're making the work. And that's why I go back to the point that you need to build a plan which has flexibility in it, so that you can make changes as necessary. So here are some of the questions which I would ask as I sat down to begin a project. Where are you starting? So we talked about that before. What have you got at the beginning? What can I change and what can't I change? So really understanding what's fixed and what's open. What's the journey for the artwork? And what's the possible journey for the group? How am I going to allow both of those things in? So, for example, a friend of mine who does a lot of work that's published with community groups has to know when in the project she needs to get the work to the printer. So it's no good saying, I'm going to be completely flexible about this. If there is a date for a publication, then there's going to be a date to submit the work to a printer, and that's going to be fixed. And that's part of the journey of the artwork. So then she's thinking about the journey of the life of the group alongside that already fixed timeline. What are the aims of the project? What do you want to get out of it? And if you're working with partners, do all the partners have the same aims? Partners don't have to have the same aims. You could, for example, do a dance project where your aim is to create something, to achieve a particular creative outcome because you're working through dance. But you may work with an organisation who would love their participants to get physically fitter. It's perfectly possible to achieve both of those aims. But you need to talk about them at the beginning and make sure that the aims that you have can be aligned. And then I'm returning to the question of intention and of values. What's really important to you in this project? So I've made a list of some of the things which people talk about in applied theatre: participation, dialogue, social justice, personal development, high quality work, building relationships, combating isolation, challenging stereotypes, teaching skills, participant-led work. So deciding which are the things from a list like that, and of course it can be a much, much longer list, what are the things that matter to you that you really don't want to let go of when you're planning? What do you want to make part of the core values and the intention of your project? So I just wanted to return for a moment to this idea of everybody having different planning styles. What you need, you personally, as an individual, do you need if you're planning something? What would you do? Get a big piece of paper and write all your ideas all over the paper. Or create a grid showing dates and times and people and giving yourself a scaffold, a structure. Writing everything on post-its that can then be themed and moved around. Or establishing aims and outcomes and letting everything flow from that. All these are different styles, and I think this is a really good exercise to try for yourself. Try them all and see which one feels like you, which is the way you like working. So different people have different styles, different organisations have different styles. And when you collaborate, you've got to find a balance between being comfortable yourself and finding a common language. It's more important to have clear plans when you're working with others. Intuition and telepathy are not enough